Committee Room 30. Signed. 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 Committee Room 30, 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 Sound. 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 Committee Room 30.
All right, members, that's us quoted, and welcome to the second meeting of the Committee for Justice. The meeting is now open to the public, and I think we're live and everything is good. Please remember that the meetings are recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. We're now just having people enter from the public gallery. That's great, thank you. Anybody who's with us in the public gallery, I trust you know that you can connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi and password details are available in the gallery rules. It should be noted that it's not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. Members, it's proposed that the oral evidence session with Criminal Justice Inspectorate Northern Ireland will be recorded by Hansard. Members agreed? Agreed. Yes, lovely, thank you. I also would remind you that you're obliged to declare, as we've just heard, any financial or other relevant interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence your approach to the matter under consideration. Any members who have interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now or when the particular matter arises in the meeting. Does anybody have any interest they wish to declare at this stage? No? On that basis, could I record that I have an immediate family member who is in the legal profession? Thank you. Right, we move to agenda item 1, and that's apologies. We have no apologies received. Everybody is present as far as I'm aware. Nobody else has any information with regard to that? No? Just to advise then that Sinead Ennis and Alex Easton will be attending the meeting virtually. Have we got them both in?
We're still waiting to get Alex in, but Sinead is present.
But Sinead's with us, okay, and we're going to try and sort out Alex shortly. All right, agenda item 2, draft minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of February 2024. Members, the draft minutes of the 15th of February are at pages 4 to 24 of your meeting pack. Are you content that those minutes are a true reflection of the proceedings of the meeting held on the 15th of February?
Agreed.
Yes, lovely. In that case, I will sign the minutes at the end of the meeting. Agenda item 3, matters arising. With regard to the work programme for February to May 2024, further to what was agreed at last week's meeting, an updated forward work programme is at pages 26 to 33 of your meeting pack, and this covers February to May, again, 2024, but some changes to dates may be required depending on the availability of witnesses, as you would expect. Are members content to note that? Unless nobody has any questions, everybody's fine. So we're content to note that, and obviously the fact that everything is dependent on availability of other people's diaries. Okay, thank you. So if we can move to the first report then of the Examiner Statutory Rules, another matter arising. The first report from the Examiner Statutory Rules to the Assembly and Appropriate Committee dated 16th of February 2024 is at pages 34 to 98 of your meeting pack. Are you content to note the report, or do you have any issues you wish to raise? Everybody content to note?
Yep.
Noted, thank you. And then agenda item 4, overview briefing on criminal justice inspection in Northern Ireland and issues in the criminal justice system. And I would refer members to pages 99 to 302 of your meeting pack for the relevant papers. Officials from Criminal Justice Inspection Northern Ireland, otherwise known as CJINI, are in attendance now, and I would invite them to come forward. They're going to provide us with an overview of their work and to discuss issues in the criminal justice system with us. So, on that basis, we welcome James Corrigan, who is the Deputy Chief Inspector and Chief Executive, and Maureen Earn, who is an Inspector from CJINI. Folks, you're very welcome to the meeting. We're glad to have you with us, and we look forward to everything that you have to say. I presume that you heard at the beginning that Hansard will transcribe the meeting and you're being broadcast, and you're happy enough with that? Is that okay? Well, on that basis, I would hand over to you to provide us with an overview of your work. Thank you very much.
Yep. Chair, thank you for the welcome and invitation to speak to the committee and the opportunity to provide an overview of the role and work of Criminal Justice Inspection Northern Ireland. The Chief Inspector, Jackie Dorkin, she has asked me to convey that she is sorry she is not available to attend the meeting today, as she is out of the country, and looks forward to engaging with the committee in the near future. I hope the committee found the briefing paper helpful, and I would like to mention a few key points about who we are, what we do, and the future inspection programme before Maureen and I respond to any questions members may have. CJI was established in 2003 and commenced inspection in 2004. So this makes our 20th anniversary this year. It is a non-departmental public body under Section 45 of the Justice Northern Ireland Act 2002 and has been sponsored by the Department of Justice since the devolution of justice. A review of criminal justice inspection commissioned by the Department of Justice was completed in 2023 with recommendations to CJI and the Department of Justice. Jackie Dorkin and I are supported by a team of 6 inspectors and 3 support staff on a full or part-time basis. Maureen is our lead inspector for prison inspections. We are acutely aware of our independence and impartiality in providing evidence-based inspection reports in individual organisations as well as thematic inspections across the whole criminal justice system. We have good relationships with and rely on expertise, mainly from His Majesty Inspectorates in England and Wales, to support particular inspections such as police, prisons, probation and prosecution services. The organisations within our remit to inspect are set out in statute and reach across all aspects of the criminal justice system, and they include the Police Service of Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Prison Service, the Public Prosecution Service for Northern Ireland, the Probation Board for Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Courts and Tribunal Service, Youth Justice Agency and the Office of the Police Ombudsman for Northern Ireland. But our remit extends to other organisations also, including Forensic Science Northern Ireland, the Parole Commissioners for Northern Ireland, the State Pathologist Department, Legal Services Agency and the Environments Agency. In essence, we inspect all organisations that engage with the criminal justice system and have investigatory responsibilities. The Chief Inspector may also be requested by the Minister to undertake particular inspections or reviews in addition to our planned inspections. And we have undertaken around one such review each year since we were formed back in 2003. CGI provides information and expert opinion to inform the public, political representatives and criminal justice system stakeholders about the work and performance of inspected bodies and the criminal justice system as a whole. We seek to identify key risks and challenges, making recommendations focused on securing improvement, promoting cooperation and actively contributing to deliver a better justice system for all in Northern Ireland. We are committed to reporting our findings accurately with integrity and objectivity. We aim to work in collaboration with inspected organisations to secure support for and agree recommendations for implementation and the delivery of better outcomes. CGI reports are laid in the Northern Ireland Assembly and published on our website. Since March 2022, CGI has published 10 inspection reports with 17 strategic and 34 operational recommendations for improvement. Most of our recommendations are fully accepted. Working alongside HM Inspectorate of Prisons, we have moved away from making a large number of operational recommendations to focus on priority and key concerns. Priority concerns require immediate attention. If I could now highlight some persistent strategic issues facing the justice system arising from our inspection work. They include reducing avoidable delay, improving the experiences of victims and witnesses, and making better use of information and data to inform service provision. The challenge in addressing these issues is not underestimated, but progress will require meaningful implementation of accepted inspection recommendations. CGI is one of 4 organisations in Northern Ireland who have been designated as part of the UK National Preventative Mechanism to meet its obligations as a signatory state of the United Nations OPCAT, that is, human rights obligations and treatment of those held in detention in prisons, the Juvenile Justice Centre, police custody and court cells. Without sufficient funding, CGI will be unable to fulfil our statutory obligations to have a prison inspection programme that reflects the inspection arrangements in England and Wales. A number of inspections are underway, and I cannot comment on current inspections and reviews until they are published. However, the committee may wish to be briefed on specific reports following publication, and we are happy to respond to any such requests. In the next few months, we will be publishing reports on community safety and local policing arrangements, a review of the effectiveness of Part 1 of the Domestic Abuse and Civil Proceedings Act, Northern Ireland, forensic services, Youth Justice Agency youth interventions, and criminal courts administration. In closing, CGI welcomes further engagement with the committee on developing our inspection programme and also in supporting your scrutiny and accountability of the criminal justice system. I hope this overview was helpful, and Maureen and I are happy to respond to any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you, Maureen. Members, does anybody have any questions? Stuart?
Yeah, no, again, thanks very much. And obviously, this will be the first, hopefully, of many engagements that we have as a committee with you. And I know from the correspondence that has been backdated that we got last week when the Assembly was down, there has been a couple of reports and statistics and stuff obviously relating to the work that you are doing, and I suppose it is that concern around going forward, looking at your work programme in terms of investigations or reviews that you are doing, but also for me the big areas around what powers of oversight in terms of implementation that you have, in terms of then if the funding is squeezed, because we can see this with the police ombudsman, for example, and other oversight bodies, particularly around a human rights angle and making sure that we're adhering to the rights agenda as well. in financial constraints, then what's lost, what work or what area of work then do you foresee or are concerned about that would be lost as part of that? And I think I would be keen to be coming back to look at the whole issue around bail and remand. I mean, obviously the statistics are shocking in some ways, where 36% of our prison population are unsentenced. And obviously we're going to be meeting with the Lady Chief Justice and others, and obviously looking at sentencing. I know the Minister is keen to bring forward updated legislation on sentencing as well, but I would be keen then around shaping that to ensure it's the best possible to have the outcomes, as you say, that we want to achieve in the system. So just your views in terms of the reports. And I know, some of the recommendations have been done, others haven't. So in what areas, in some there hasn't been very much progress that has been done. So again, it's that oversight. Obviously we'll play a role in that, but what more could be done, or are there missing pieces in terms of that accountability piece, even for yourselves, that could be looked at? And again, the whole issue around, an idea on when the Youth Justice report will come out. Because I'm keen again to look at that whole area of work as well. I probably have a load of questions, but I keep you here all day, so we'll do a follow-up meeting or a further engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and take each of those in turn. So maybe if we start with the first point you made, and I suppose you followed up there at the end in terms of the powers of implementation, how we ensure that our recommendations are actually delivered. And I suppose that has been a challenge for us going back the whole 20 years since we've been established, which is that we're not a regulator, so we don't have the powers of enforcement. So the strength is based on the evidence-led inspections. It's also based on persuasion, and essentially it's based on obviously working in partnership with the inspected organisations to deliver improvements. But I would make the point that it's very rare that our recommendations are not accepted. So there is, so the challenge is obviously to try and get them delivered. And I would agree with your point, which is that I think there's work that the committee itself can do in terms of helping, I suppose, in delivering those recommendations around your scrutiny role, and holding the organisations to account for what they've already agreed to in terms of recommendations. And as I said, we would really welcome that engagement with the committee in terms of that scrutiny. In terms of funding, yes, I think you would have heard from the Permanent Secretary last week in terms of the challenges facing the justice system as a whole, and the same applies to criminal justice inspection, because if you look back at our funding, we're a small organisation. Our overall budget is 1.1 million. 10 years ago, our budget was 1.2 million. So actually our budget has gone down by almost 10% in 10 years, while most of the other parts of the justice system budgets have increased. So that does impact on what we can do. We have moved away from an organisation that was essentially all full-time employees to now, half our workforce is working part-time, including our inspectors. So that impacts on the number of inspections that we can do in a particular year. And it also impacts on, obviously, in terms of the running of the organisation and publicising the work that we do. So I would say that is an ongoing challenge. My big concern at the moment, if you ask me in terms of funding, is in terms of the funding that we usually set aside for prison inspections. As things stand at the moment, that is discretionary funding within our budget to bring in HM inspectors of prisons to do those prison inspections. At present, we can fund a prison inspection in this coming year. After that, if the budget remains similar to what it is at the moment, we will not be able to do a prison inspection in 2025. And I think that has big implications in terms of, you mentioned there around human rights issues, but also in terms of benchmarking performance of the prison service with England and Wales, and Maureen can go into more detail in terms of how we do prison inspections, but I think that's a particular concern for me going forward. Around the issue of bail and remand, I think that report, we published that about just over a year ago, and you're right, that the percentage of prisoners on remand, which is 36%, I think when we did the inspection it was 38%. If you look at comparable figures in other jurisdictions, at the time we did the inspection, England and Wales, 16% of the prison population was on remand. Republic of Ireland, 22% was on remand. Scotland were getting very, very concerned when we were doing the inspection. They were at 29%, and they thought that was a terrible sort of indictment of their criminal justice system, and we were sitting at 38%. So we're probably, if you look at the figures across all of Europe, we're actually one of the highest across the whole of Europe. And the consequences of that are enormous. We know the consequences in terms of defendants, being held unsentenced. And McGabry Prison, for example, half the prison population are unsentenced. But there's also huge implications for victims, because the unknown part in terms of whether somebody's actually, are they on remand or are they on bail, or when are they going to be released, like unsentenced, for example. And there's the cost. The huge cost of having such a prison population which are unsentenced, and then the indirect cost, which you heard last week from the Permanent Secretary, which was that unsentenced prisoners are not engaging with rehabilitation programs and reducing reoffending, and when they're released, very often those issues haven't been dealt with, and that's it's restricting the prison service and probation in terms of what they can do. So that's, I think, hopefully that's covered all of the main issues that you've mentioned. Maureen, do you want to maybe say anything more about it? Or we can come back to the prisons if somebody has more specific questions about prisons.
I suppose the other point you had around how we encourage implementation is in terms of our process of inspection. So we will do full inspections and then come back within a period to do a follow-up review, which specifically looks at what progress has been made against the recommendations. And that was a new thing for us this year in terms of looking at the independent reviews of progress on the prisons. So we had inspected McGilligan and McGabry relatively recently in terms of a full inspection, and then came back to, rather than wait until we did another full unannounced inspection, we came back much sooner to see, well, what progress are you making? And that was from the point of view of encouraging and supporting the progress that they were making, and where that was good and reasonable in cases, but also maybe giving them the opportunity to refocus on areas which hadn't been addressed. So it is about working with the inspected organisations to support that journey of continuous improvement.
And just the last question, which was, when would the Youth Justice Agency report be published? I would expect it to be in the next 2 months, next couple of months, so it's quite soon. Yeah.
Very much. Did you finish, Jess?
I think I'll follow up, because I think there is something around even for the committee, and I don't know if the committee if you've ever done a joint visit to the prisons, or because it'd be something I'd be keen to look at in terms of getting in to the prisons and to look, and particularly with some of the information around drugs, health and well-being, rights for prisoners and stuff as well. There are concerning statistics. I know there's some positive work in terms of the women's element of that as well. So to kind of just get in and see that, and be keen to engage with you is whether we can do a joint visit. I don't know if that's possible or even appropriate, but just to make sure that we're picking up on the issues in terms of oversight and scrutiny, it would be useful. Thanks.
It may be helpful to know that for the Justice spokespersons, as were previously, the head of the prison service had arranged 4 visits to prisons, and the one to McGabry is scheduled, I think, for the 22nd of March.
Yeah.
So certainly, that's something I'm sure we can circulate that to other members too. If anybody wants to attend that, we can get that information. But I appreciate then there's still McGilligan and Hydebank Wood. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation in terms of the work of the Criminal Justice Inspection. I had the opportunity to meet with your Chief Executive, Jackie, a couple of months ago, and we went through many of these issues that you're bringing to us today. But there was one issue that we highlighted late on in our conversation with her, a rather potentially niche area for Northern Ireland, but one which nevertheless is top of the public agenda at this point in time, and that's Royal Mail. You have inspection powers for the criminal activity, those that have criminal inspection power, criminal activity powers within Royal Mail. Now, given the current scandal and the fact that, and I appreciate your resource is small, also Royal Mail doesn't figure big in terms of the work that you would do in Northern Ireland, but nevertheless you have a very clear responsibility to inspect the work that has been done. The news and media has clearly also reported that there are some very serious cases of concern here in Northern Ireland from postal fish from people who had sub-postmasters, and the way in which that has affected their lives and their businesses and their mental health. So what I need to know now is, both going back, how aware were you as an organisation of what was going on across the UK? Why did that not ring alarm bells for you to conduct a report, which you have a legal right to do here in Northern Ireland? And when is your next report going to be done?
Right. I suppose to answer your last question there, how aware was CGI? Well, like a lot of other people, we were not aware of what was happening in terms of Royal Mail. Certainly, our jurisdiction would just be Royal Mail in Northern Ireland. And more to the point, it was never raised. Jackie Dorkin and previous chief inspectors always do an annual consultation with stakeholder organisations at the end of the year, at the beginning of the new year, to set a new, essentially, business plan for the forthcoming year and a new programme of inspections. In my recollection, and I've been in CGI a long time, that has never been come up. That the Royal Mail has never come up as an issue in any of those consultations with political parties, criminal justice organisations, stakeholder organisations. But saying that, we all know it's a very topical issue at the moment, and you're right, it is part of our remit, as is lots of other smaller organisations that we haven't, that because of resources and lots of other reasons, we can't inspect every organisation, but saying that, we are doing an inspection at the moment, which was in our plan last year, looking at all those organisations like Royal Mail that have investigatory powers which are separate from the police. So essentially, we're doing that inspection at the moment. It's a cross-cutting inspection. It includes Royal Mail, it includes Airport Police and Environment Agency, all those, and lots of government departments that have investigatory responsibilities. So we're doing that at the moment. So and we're looking, I suppose, at common issues across those organisations. And that report is, actually, it's still during field work. So, on the basis of that, there may be particular issues that we want to follow up in terms of doing a more detailed piece of work. But I would also emphasise that consultation that Jackie Dorkin is doing at the moment, it's still ongoing, and we would still welcome, obviously, the input of members and the committee in general in terms of that, because if it's an issue that people feel is very important and it should be part of our programme, we will certainly consider it as part of our either this year's inspection programme or perhaps next year, with the caveat obviously that there's a small number of inspectors can only do a certain number of inspections, but we're very, very happy to take views in that respect.
But I mean, not given the public knowledge now, not unsurprising that Royal Mail didn't alert you to the fact that there was a very serious issue going on inside that organisation over the Horizon scandal. Had you any contact from postmasters or those who were being affected by this? And indeed, to what extent do you inform people who are employed by organisations like Royal Mail that in fact you do have a role? If I went out onto the street now and asked the public, or indeed if I went into a post office and asked the staff, did you know that the enforcement side of Royal Mail can actually be inspected by Criminal Justice Inspection in Northern Ireland? My suspicion is that the knowledge of that would be tiny, if perhaps even zero. Yeah,
that's probably a fair enough conclusion, because sometimes when we approach organisations that we're going to do an inspection, we get some surprise, because the organisations themselves may not necessarily understand that they are part of our remit. And of course, our remit goes back, to the establishment of CGI 20 years ago. Yeah, so there is, now we do our best in terms of advertising it. Like, we obviously have it in our annual report every year. We outline our remit and the organisations. In our business plan, we outline the remit. We try and we communicate, as best we can in terms of our remit. But I suppose the reality is that that most of our effort in the last number of years have been focused on the big criminal justice organisations, and particularly looking at issues which are cross-cutting issues across organisations, because I know the Permanent Secretary said last week that the big challenges for the justice system are not necessarily within organisations, but often in the boundaries between organisations. And that would be one of our findings going back over 20 years, is that the biggest challenges, and I would say the actual problems that still exist, are still at the boundaries between organisations rather than within organisations.
I think, I'm conscious too that is a significant issue, but it was a massive national issue, not just relating to Northern Ireland.
Just very briefly, by way of follow-up. So if someone who has been either affected by the scandal in Northern Ireland or was unaware today that you had an inspection role, can they come forward and speak to you about their concerns in respect of this, particularly if you're now going to undertake a further review?
Yeah, of course they can come and speak to us. Now under legislation we don't deal with individual complaints. No. Now there are ombudsmans set up to deal with individual complaints, but if it's broad or systematic issues, yes, we would certainly welcome anybody that would be willing to speak to us on our inspections.
Finally, Chair, then, not moving away from that and just on the broad issue in terms of criminal justice inspection, you made reference to the fact, and you suggested to Deirdre as well, that the reports that are out there, once you produce a report, they are broadly and very generally accepted. But how quickly do the actions follow?
Well, when we are completing an inspection report, we ask the organisation to prepare an action plan. And if it's a good action plan, we publish that action plan on our website at the time of the publication. And that action plan will have timelines. And we then we attempt to come back and do a follow-up review. Generally, follow-up reviews are maybe 18 months to 24 months after the publication of the report. And we will hold organisations to account for what they've promised and agreed in terms of their action plan. Now, sometimes those the delivery can slip, and there's lots of reasons for that. But broadly speaking, we expect organisations to deliver what they accepted and what they agreed to. And the follow-up inspection reports and reviews is the opportunity for us to do that. Now, I would add, I think if certainly with the committee now, I suppose that's another opportunity to hold organisations accountable for their action plans. And I think when you meet with individual organisations, I think it would be worthwhile to ask for their action plans in response to our recommendations.
Thank you, Chair.
I've got Alex next. Go ahead, Alex.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. I noticed in your presentation there's an awful lot of people on remand, a lot more than the rest of the UK, and it went on to mention about the possibility of a Bail Act. What discussions have you had with the Justice Minister about bringing forward a Bail Act to try and reduce the amount of people that are on remand?
Yep, thank you. That issue about the Bail Act was one of our recommendations actually in the inspection on bail and remand. We didn't have a discussion with the minister in terms of that, because I suppose at the time when the report was being published, the minister was essentially, I suppose the Assembly wasn't sitting at that stage, but we did have discussions with officials. And to be honest, I think it's a recommendation. It's the strategic recommendation in our report. But to be honest, there's a bit of reluctance to move towards a Bail Act in Northern Ireland, and it's not just among officials; it's also in the wider criminal justice system. And I suppose that's why we made it a recommendation, because you may know that other jurisdictions have had a Bail Act going back many years. I think in England and Wales, there's been a Bail Act since 1976. In the Republic of Ireland, there's been a Bail Act since 1997. The Law Commission recommended a Bail Act in Northern Ireland over a decade ago, and we repeated that recommendation in our report. And the reason why a bail act is important from our perspective is that our bail legislation is quite fragmented. Some of it's outdated. A bail act would be an opportunity to consolidate it. But probably more importantly, a bail act, and if you'd had a public consultation for a bail act, I think it would open up the discussion and the debate around how bail and remand actually operates in Northern Ireland. Because I think it's, from our view, is there's not enough sort of debate around the consequences of bail when it doesn't work properly. There's also essentially, in my view as well, a kind of an acceptance of the status quo and maybe dealing with some of the sort of operational issues rather than dealing with some of the big legislation issues. Now, I do welcome, I have to say, the commitment made by the Minister in terms of a bail act for children. I think that's a positive development. But I do think there's an opportunity to go beyond that and think about a bail act for all individuals, I suppose, in Northern Ireland. And I think that's, it is a recommendation, and it wasn't. I would hope now with the new executive in place and with the Justice Committee in place that there might be more focus on following that recommendation from that report.
Alex, go ahead. We can't hear you. You might need to unmute.
Right. You mentioned there about some resistance. Can you explain what that resistance to a bail act is that you're encountering?
I think that at that stage, I think the main problem was the number of competing, I suppose, legislative commitments and requirements. I think that's the reality. There was at that stage there was a long waiting list of what required legislation, and I suppose criminal justice inspection coming along with another request. I think they felt that there was other areas that could be progressed, before a bail act. So they didn't rule out the bail act. They just said that it would be difficult within the current Assembly mandate. But I suppose my question would be, at least, and so instead of us recommending that you implement the bail act, what we decided to do in terms of the recommendation is we felt that the Department of Justice should start a consultation for a bail act. So that's what came out of those discussions. So that is something that I think my view is that should be something that should be seriously considered now at this stage. Now that the Assembly is back and the Minister is in place, that a public consultation on a bail act should be progressed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Alex, thank you. Ciara?
Just three areas. With regards Royal Mail, and specifically, obviously, post office scandal, that huge things like, and I know it's a constituency issue of mine where parents are very concerned in relation to the postage of illicit substances within the postal service. Is that something that would be part of an inspection of how Royal Mail actually try to reduce that? So that would be one of the questions, or track it or trace it or whatever. I definitely would have a concern around that. Secondly, and I raised it last week in relation to the prison service and the use of body scanners. Is that an area that has previously already been inspected to ensure that you apply human rights compliant in the use of it? Because I have had concerns through parents, through solicitors, in relation to individuals who are constantly subject to body scanners, whereby they're not informed or engaged of exactly what is found, and then they're put into isolation for weeks on end with no explanation and then released. So is that an area, a part of it in the inspection? And then thirdly, in relation to the previous recommendations in the report regarding Macarbery Prison, one of the ones I'm gravely concerned at, and I know there's a good few of the recommendations, of the 14, there were 7 not, was the weak oversight of those prisoners who are at risk. So what I would like to ask, and that's a grave concern for me, that of all the recommendations, that would be one that should be to the fore. first and foremost, and be dealt with and resourced. So is there any way, do you prioritise your recommendations in relation to what they should be looking at and where the resources should go? Because that should not be an outstanding recommendation, but maybe some discussion around that. Or?
Yep, thank you. I'll deal with your first question, Royal Mail, and then Maureen will follow up with the prison issues. In terms of the scope of a potential inspection, that I suppose that is something that we consider when we're drafting the terms of reference. So if we were to do an inspection of Royal Mail in Northern Ireland, and it was a single, essentially, inspection, the scope could be, the scope would be broadly, it would be fairly broad, because what we look at is in terms of inspections, we look at strategy, governance, policy. We look at delivery in terms of how to deliver against their objectives and their policies, and we look at outcomes. What difference does it make? So those type of inspections are broad ranging, and we would develop terms of reference, and we would share those terms of reference with the inspected organisation, but also with the committee if they wish to see them before inspections. So I wouldn't, if we were to do that inspection, we will follow the evidence. If the risks been highlighted, we would ensure that those risks would be included in an inspection. The other point I would say is if for whatever reasons, and there's lots of reasons that we're not able to put, say, a Royal Mail inspection into a new programme or a future programme, there is the sort of opportunity that a minister can request us to do a review on any part of the criminal justice system. And that's what I said. We've dealt with ministerial reviews and reviews from the Permanent Secretary when the Assembly is not sitting. We've dealt with those reviews, about one on average each year, going back over the last 20 years. So there is another mechanism to request CGI to do an inspection or a review. So Maureen, maybe if you want to follow up on the prisons.
Yes, I'll maybe start with the supporting people at risk. So I suppose maybe just in general context, we have changed how we report findings in prison inspection reports in line with changes that were made by His Majesty Inspectorate of Prisons in England and Wales. Previously, you will have seen 30 to 35 recommendations being presented in reports. The change has been to bring that back to no more than 15 concerns, of which a number of those would be priority concerns. So those are things which in our minds require immediate and urgent attention to correct. So yes, when we did the full inspection of Maghaberry in 2022, there were concerns about the safeguarding of people who were at risk of suicide and self-harm. And that was an area that we then followed up in the most recent independent review of progress. And we found that the prison had made progress against that priority concern, and that they had made reasonable progress there. So they had appointed a lead. There was better engagement in between staff in terms of caring and supporting people. There was more clear rationale around the reason why people would be placed on supporting prisoner at risk procedures. And there was better intervention and support being provided. There was also a much better use of data to actually examine and interrogate what was happening within the prison. So there was still work to do, but we were assured that they were making reasonable progress against that priority concern.
Just on that, with regards to the individual's health, mental health and well-being, etc., what is the relationship and maybe information sharing between the Department of Health and the prison service?
Okay. So the prison healthcare services are provided by the South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust. And so at an operational level, we tend to find that the relationship is good between the prison staff and the nursing staff, whether in primary healthcare or mental health and other disciplines within the prison. There can be issues around information sharing, and those have been highlighted in reports, and we would like to see better information sharing to safeguard people and a better understanding around that. In terms of, we do see some tensions in the relationships, particularly at strategic level on certain areas, and we highlighted those in our reports, say around adult safeguarding procedures, for example, and also around the approach to drug and alcohol, the development of the strategy. So there can be tensions at time when we would urge the two organisations to work collaboratively and closer together in the interest of improving outcomes for prisoners.
And the likes of trauma-informed practice within the prison service, is that something that's already been rolled out, or?
Certainly, some staff have been involved in training around trauma-informed practice, and I would say the prison service would be able to provide, more information on that in due course. I would say, just from my experience, a lot of work has been impacted because of the pandemic, and then the high prisoner numbers and the efforts then to recover the regime in custody. But obviously, it is a direction of travel in terms of trauma-informed care and approaches to supporting people in custody. Yes. And then just picking up on the use of body scanners. So yes, I mean, in the most recent inspections, the scanners have been in operation for around about a year. And we did find that they were reducing the amount of illicit substances that were coming into the prison. But yes, acknowledging that increasing numbers of people were being held in care and supervision units. And as you know, we had done a previous inspection around the operation of care and supervision units and subsequently a follow-up review. But at that stage, when we were doing that work, we weren't seeing that level of use, because when we did our inspection, we were seeing that actually the use of the care and supervision units, use of segregation, was reducing, and the average time spent in segregation was reducing. But we haven't been back to inspect that particular area in light of the rollout of the body scanners of themselves. But it is an area that is always looked at in terms of prison inspection.
Thank you.
Maurice, I'm going to bring you in next, but just before I do, Ciara's touched on an issue that I wanted to raise with you, because in your report about your inspection of Maghaberry, which is at page 170 of our packs, you say, despite being an identified risk, the prison's response to the supply and demand for drugs was not robust. In our survey, 41% of prisoners indicated that it was easy to get illicit drugs at the prison, and 28% said they had developed a drug problem while there. The prison did not have a sufficient strategy to address this. And I was interested in this because what struck me about that was that a lot of this is beyond the prison's control. Yeah. So, for example, they would say that the body scanners have significantly reduced the amount of class drugs coming into the prisons. However, the significant problem is prescription drugs. And as far as I understand it, because of patient confidentiality, there are some prisoners who are in control of their own medication, and particularly over holiday periods when the trust can't provide staff. But more than that, because of patient confidentiality, the prison is not permitted to know what the baseline is for prisoners. So they do not know what medication prisoners have. They do not know how much of it they have. So how are they supposed to tackle the problem whenever they don't know how much is in circulation in the prison? How are they supposed to develop a plan? And has that been borne in mind?
Yeah, I mean, so those are very serious issues that were raised in the Maghaberry inspection report, and actually similar issues identified at McGilligan and previously and during other inspections. So yes, whilst the body scanners have reduced the amount of illicit substances coming in, the main problem at the minute is around prescription medication. There is some discussion and debate around the source of that prescription medication and whether all of that is medication that has been prescribed by the trust provider. But nonetheless, that is the problem that there is at the moment. There have been efforts made by the trust to reduce the availability of medicines at high risk of abuse and trading, but there hasn't been sufficient collaborative working in our minds around how you deal with the impact of withdrawal amongst the population, and your efforts to look at medicines, spot checks and responses to the trading of medication. And that's an area when we mentioned about kind of that relationship between the trust and the prison service, that's where we would like to see much more collaborative working on that front.
I think because in these circumstances, what the prison can do is extremely limited if they have no baseline, because even were they to test people, they don't know whatever they've got in the system is their own prescription or somebody else's. Plus it can lead to antisocial behaviour and all of those issues that arise because drugs are currency and worth 4 times the value in prison. So thank you, Morris. I apologise for that. I'll bring you in now.
All right, Chair. Chair, it was alluded to at the start of the meeting, the high number of prisoners still in remand. What big an impact has the failure, I think, of the legal aid system on that number? And I noticed you had made recommendations to procure a new contract in December. Has that contract been accrued, first of all, and second of all, has it made any difference to the overall number, or is the legal aid system actually holding people in remand as opposed to trying to get them through the courts and sentenced or released?
I suppose I think from our report on bail remand, there's a lot of different reasons why remand is so high, and I know that the department and the criminal justice organisations, there's a working group trying to sort of understand the reasons for the remand and come up with solutions. And I think our report, it's I suppose if you were to pick at the reasons whether legal aid is responsible, we did speak to solicitors and barristers when we did our inspection, and they obviously, yes, they did talk about the rates of legal aid, but I'm not sure they made the direct connection between legal aid and prisoners being kept on remand. But they did. But essentially, they said that it was difficult to deal with the numbers that they have and the rates of pay that they get. And and I think that if people have difficulty, I suppose, if defendants and suspects have difficulty getting solicitors on legal aid, well, that would create problems. But I do think there's some other bigger reasons, I think, behind the high remand rate. I think our bail system is not as effective as it could be. And we talked about the need for a bail act. We know about a lot of the numbers of people on bail that essentially breach those bail conditions and are then sort of remanded into custody. Sometimes it's about housing, sometimes it's about lack of other accommodation or substance abuse. So there are bigger issues. There is a need for an alternative to remand, for example, some form of electronic tagging system. You get that in other jurisdictions, which is more advanced. We've been sort of looking at possible solutions for years without coming up with a solution in terms of having an electronic monitoring system that would keep people out of the prison and possibly reduce the number of remand. But the biggest, by far, cause of remand and high remand is the delays in the system. That's the primary reason why the remand figures are so high, because people are waiting so long for their cases to progress, and are waiting so long for court cases to actually to happen. And that problem of delay has been endemic, I would say, in our system going back since CJI was established in 2003. We did our first inspection on delay in 2006. At that stage, we produced lots of figures and data which showed that Northern Ireland had the slowest, certainly in comparison to England and Wales, which is our closest sort of comparator jurisdiction, our cases were significantly slower than England and Wales in 2006. We came back and did another inspection in 2010. We did a follow-up review in 2012. In that follow-up review in 2012, when we hadn't seen very much progress, we recommended that there should be statutory time limits. Now, we didn't say that it should be across the system, but we said you should start in the youth courts and prioritise young people. And then we did future inspections. Look, for example, you'll see in your pack that we did an inspection on file quality and disclosure, which was published about a year ago. Again, the delays, poor quality files, inadequate disclosure is leading to delays in the system. So I think a lot of our problems in terms of our justice system at the moment sits at the door of the slowness of the system. And we've never, in 20 years, we haven't got to grips with the causes. We know, well, we do know the causes, lots of reports by Criminal Justice Inspection and the Audit Office and others have explained the causes, but we haven't got the grips in terms of solution. And there's been various initiatives, like, for example, the committal reform, and there's been sort of pilots in various areas in terms of speeding up justice. There's been attempts to divert more people away from the criminal justice system, but none of that has made enough impact to really change the figures. So the reality is, some people are waiting over 2 years for a case to progress through the system, and that's just unacceptable. And we are far slower than any neighbouring jurisdiction. And I think a lot of the problems that come up in other inspection reports and that you'll be dealing with can go back to that slowness of our justice system.
Just one other wee point. It's around community restorative justice. You've highlighted that there are governance issues and financial irregularities. Could you elaborate a wee bit more on what you mean by that? Because I've got concerns about that particular thing as well.
I suppose before we did the review, or we were asked to do the review by the Department of Justice, you're right, there was concerns raised around governance and some of the other issues within Community Restorative Justice Ireland, which is the Restorative Justice Group, which is based in Republican and nationalist areas. And we were asked to come in and do a review of that organisation, and we published a report. Now, broadly speaking, that report was a positive report in the sense that we found that restorative justice, Community Restorative Justice Ireland, at that stage were putting in place solutions to deal with governance challenges that they were facing. And we did make some recommendations, obviously, in terms of improvement. But I think the concerns that you refer to, broadly speaking, a lot of those issues were being resolved or have been resolved since we published our report. I would say that in terms of community restorative justice, again, it's organisations would come within our remit, and previously we had a role in terms of accreditation. Now, I know now that role is moving, I suppose, beyond criminal justice inspection, that there's another independent mechanism in terms of accreditation of those schemes, but we still have a remit to inspect essentially the broader restorative justice schemes in Northern Ireland. Now, I would say that, obviously you mentioned a couple of issues, but I would say that one of the positive aspects that came out of that report was the good relationships between practitioners, restorative justice practitioners in communities and the police. And essentially there was a lot of work happening in terms of preventing crime and engagement with community police officers. I think that was one of the positive aspects. And you'll also note from our briefing pack that we've just completed an inspection looking at community policing. And again, that report will be published in the next couple of months. And I think we'll be able to go into, obviously maybe at some other future committee, we can go into a lot more detail in terms of how policing is delivered at community level and at local level. But that report that you mentioned, those issues are covered in detail in that particular report, which is available on our website.
Thanks very much. It's all, not trying to be negative about it. It's just raised a few questions because you've given me a positive answer. So that reassures me. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think on the basis of our report, the Department of Justice was able to restore funding for the restorative justice schemes.
Thank you, Chair.
You're nearly done, folks. There's just me left. Justin, I'll take you first, then I'll come in.
Okay, James, how are you? You've got very authentic, trustworthy, informed and voice of empathy as well. So I like your lilt. Are you South Armagh?
I live in South Armagh, yeah. So.
Where are you from? You're Monaghan, man?
Monaghan, yeah.
Monaghan, yeah. It's the border people. How many years have you been engaged and employed by the CGA?
Well, I said at the beginning, Criminal Justice Inspection was formally launched in 2004. We did our first inspection. We published our first inspection in 2005. So that's 20 years ago. I will be 20 years in CGI in October. So I've been in the organisation since almost the beginning. And in that time, we've probably we do an average maybe 10 or 12 inspections a year, and we, hundreds of recommendations. So I suppose, yes, I would speak with quite a bit of experience over that 20 years. But saying that, the challenges keep changing. The solutions can be different. There's always I suppose I would argue, and you would expect me to argue, is that our oversight of the criminal justice system is very, very important. It came out of the Good Friday Agreement and the Belfast Agreement, and it gives that assurance to not only the committee and to the Assembly and to ministers, but also to the general public in terms of what is reality some parts of our public service, which is hidden away from a lot of the public, unless you happen to be a victim or a defendant or somebody that needs to be part of the criminal justice system. But most people, are not not familiar with the justice system. I think what we do is try and raise more general awareness about what the justice system does, the challenges it faces, and how important it is for people's lives and what we do every day.
Are you passionate about your work?
Justin, sorry, if I may, I think that this session is less about James and Maureen personally and their credentials.
This is relevant, sure, really relevant.
I'm not sure it is.
Well,
Justin,
let me get to it.
I think if we can move to the reports that we have in front of us and questions that we have
I'd say,
about
are
the
you passionate in
inspections.
terms of your work, in terms of the reports and the awareness that you speak about? Are you making a difference to the criminal justice system by your work, by the reports, by the assessments, inspections? Are you making an impact?
I think we are. Like you have to think about it. We're a small organisation. We're just 11 people, and we publish about 10 or 12 inspection reports every year. Our budget is 1.1 million. That's 0.01% of the overall criminal justice budget. So are we making an impact beyond that 0.01%? I think we are. In terms of our oversight of the criminal justice system, and in terms of how we encourage and work with the criminal justice organisations to deliver, I suppose, improved performance. And I think our real value isn't always about what we do within the individual organisations. It's about how we have that remit across the whole justice system, and we're able to sort of look at issues which are sometimes missed by organisations themselves, and try and come up with solutions which encourage partnership and collaborative working. So I think we do sort of, I suppose we see, I think justifiably, I think our impact is perhaps more than what would maybe appear in terms of our budget and the small number of people we have.
In terms of the particular challenges linked to youth justice, particularly in terms of joint working with education and health, are you finding that there are many issues in relation to learning difficulties and people who are in the criminal justice system as a consequence of their learning difficulties, and how is that being addressed, and how are your reports feeding back to enable that issue to be addressed more properly and more prominently in the future?
Yeah, well, like obviously youth justice and young people in the justice system has been a topic of a lot of our inspections, and learning difficulties and mental health has been the subject of inspections, and we've done a particular inspection on mental health. I know Maureen probably want to say maybe a wee bit more in terms of youth justice as well, in terms of maybe the inspections that we've done on youth justice. But yes, I would say that, and I have to say, I don't want to come across as being overly negative in terms of the challenges and the funding, because there's lots of good things. We've seen lots of good things in the criminal justice system over the last 20 years. And I would say that how we deal with children in the criminal justice system is one of our successes, because the numbers of children held in the juvenile justice system is we're down to a very small number, less than 10 on average at the moment. The Youth Justice Centre is actually resourced for almost 40 in terms of its staffing, and it's
lower now.
It's a bit lower now. So essentially, that has been a success, but in some ways it's also a challenge, because essentially, it costs almost £900,000 to hold a young person in custody for 1 year. The model in terms of service delivery is not sustainable going forward. So places like it's a victim of its own success in one way in terms of reducing the number of children, but at the same time, we have to come up with a new approach. I think that's why we welcome obviously the new sort of plans in terms of a joint care and justice campus. So I think that's. I think maybe Maureen, if you wanted to say maybe more in terms of actually the inspections.
I mean, I do think that in the inspections that we've done in the Juvenile Justice Centre and also of prisons, that there is evidence of clearly unmet need around, you know, communication difficulties and neurodiversity needs. It is a reality that there is a lack of funding for, you know, prison healthcare services, and which has led, you know, to further unmet need, and specifically thinking about, you know, around addictions and personality disorder, which I know that you touched on last week in your discussions. We have seen, and certainly I've seen in 2 particular inspections, the benefit that speech and language therapists bring to the care of young people in Highbank Wood and also in the adult prisons. It was very evident when we did our review of the care and supervision units, just what support and help and guidance those particular staff, you know, in conjunction with the wider support team around people in prison, that they brought in terms of understanding of where that person was coming from, but also how best to try and support and engage them in support.
Okay. Last question, what is avoidable delay, James, and are staff vacancies contributing or exacerbating issues around delay?
Yes, I think I'm not sure whether we coined that phrase avoidable delay or whether it was in existence before our original inspection in 2006, but certainly that was the title of our original inspection. I think the term avoidable delay came across. I remember having discussions with the police and the public prosecution service at the time, and I think the prosecutors were very keen to emphasise that some delay is not avoidable, and you know that the distinction needs to be about avoidable delay. So I think that's, you know, and when you want if you want a precise definition of avoidable delay, it is delay that essentially is nugatory time, like it's time that, you know, could be taken out of the system and not be detrimental in terms of the proper administration of justice and the time that's required to do proper investigations and make and PPS to make decisions. Because what we would have said to the police over the years is it's not necessarily about speeding up the preparation of files. It's about getting it right first time on time, as they would say. It's about, because a good quality police file, even if it takes a bit longer, is still better because essentially allows the public prosecution service to make their decision on prosecution quicker, and then it helps the case to progress when it's in the court. So that, I think that's, you know, that's it. So the focus has always been essentially on the delay, which is unnecessary or unavoidable. And to be honest, there's a lot of that, I have to say, within the justice system at the moment. And another example of avoidable delay would be when a file perhaps sits on somebody's desk or within a certain unit for a long time waiting on somebody to actually review that file. That would be avoidable delay. And I suppose that links into your question around resources, because, you know, organisations will say if we had more resources we could do better. And I have no doubt that that's true, like, because the justice system, you can see it across the justice system, the impact of the resource cuts are really starting to bite, like. And we know that in policing, for example, you know, it's very often in community policing and neighbourhood policing that takes the hit when it comes to reductions in policing budgets, and that's the preventative part really in terms of policing, you know. So that makes an impact. So I would say yes, resources is certainly a key factor, and if you want to really sort of deal with the problem of delay, you do need the resources, but it needs to be very targeted, because it's, you know, you need to be, it's not just about saying that the police require more resources to do files or turn around files quicker. If you don't put in the same resources in the public prosecution service and in the courts, all you're going to do is get essentially a logjam between when the cases are prepared by the police. Like, so it needs to be very targeted use of resources, I would argue, rather than necessarily just funding certain organisations.
James, Maureen?
Thank you, Justin. So folks, I just have a couple of things that I want to check. Just in the course of the conversation, it ties in. You've mentioned some of the issues, Maureen, you particularly mentioned some of the issues around personality disorder. And some of your reports there talk about insufficient access to psychologically informed treatments around personality disorder. Where do you think the gaps are?
So, I mean, essentially the major gap is in the legislation, that it doesn't recognise personality disorder, and consequently there are not the services in custody, although the Trust have engaged a clinical psychologist and have other support staff there to help address the needs of some people, but it's certainly insufficient to meet the needs of people across the board. And you will be aware of the Regulation and Quality Improvement Authority's review of vulnerable persons in custody, and clearly that was recognised as a huge unmet need in that report, and there are task and finish groups working towards that, because if you look across the water into England and Wales, there is an offender personality disorder pathway that has delivered services into prisons in terms of assessment units and treatment units, and other programmes such as an enhanced support service, which is really to engage with people who are likely to engage in violence, prolific self-harm, and try and work with them to provide additional support and keep them out of places like segregation units and help restore some of the harm and damage that has been caused.
So essentially then that gap is with us. Yes, it's a legislative gap, and that's fair enough. But it's helpful to have it on the record, thank you. Just with regard to your report about the preparation of files, I note that within that, obviously there's a lot of figures around the police and delay there and the quality of files in the police. But you've noted that the PPS has been meeting the standard of files and it's relatively good in terms of the timing of decision making, and yet some cases from the Canova report have taken 3 years for a decision. Did you take that into account?
Yes, I suppose in terms of how we came to those figures around, I suppose, the quality of files and decision making, we did a review. We did a file review of 100 police files and 100 public prosecution service files, and yes, you're right. The figures are, are broadly positive. I'm just looking here at the precise figures.
Police are in around 54%.
Yeah, the police is 54% for Crown Court cases and 44% for Magistrate Court cases. That, I suppose, we would say that's like, for example, 44% of Magistrate Court cases reviewed either did not meet or only partially met required or agreed standards. We would say that's there's room for improvement, let's say, in terms of those figures.
My concern is more around PPS and circumstances where it's taking 3 years to make a determination as to whether or not something should proceed. Yeah. Surely, as far as the inspectorate is concerned, 3 years is unacceptable.
Yes, that's the reality is, yes. Any case that goes on for that long is unacceptable in terms of, particularly of victims that are waiting for that length of time. Now, I think that report, I think what it presents is in terms of the file review, it presents somewhat of a mixed picture, because the PPS, there was, for example, one of the positive findings for the PPS was that 96% of PPS files examined fully met the test for making prosecution decisions. So I suppose that was a positive. But as you said, the time to actually make that decision, there's definitely scope for improvement there, which I suppose what that really says is that we have a problem with delays, and it's at all stages of case progression, and the PPS in their defence would argue that they have they are short of staffing, and that has slowed down their decision making, and they would say that COVID obviously increased that problem for them, and I know they've made that a priority so at present in terms of addressing those challenges, but there's still, I still think you're right, there's scope for improvement. Yeah,
I think there is, and that's why it is a bit disappointing to see. Because it seems to happen with PPS in the bigger cases. So to read that there's relatively good timing of decision making in the PPS, I'm not sure reflects the entirety of the picture. With regard to just, I have one that's straightforward and one that I would like a bit more explanation on. We've had a conversation today about bail and remand, and within the course of your experience and your inspections, I would like you to comment, if you would, on your assessment of the effectiveness and enforcement of both police and court bail, because I have some concerns around the effectiveness of both of those, and also I'm not clear on the extent to which enforcement is being carried out to the extent that it should be.
Yes, I think that report, which was published in 2003 on bail and remand, we did, like, I would say half of that report dealt with police bail and court bail, and we did make, a number of recommendations, and some of them are directly linked to what you said there. We said that the police needs to make, and improvements are needed to the operation of pre-charge bail, for example, in the police. We said that the PSNI should have better management information and use it to improve police bail. Because I would say one of the difficulties around bail is, and we found that when we were doing the inspection, was the lack of information available within the police and also made available to us to inform their decisions on police bail. And I think that was a concern, and we raised that specifically in the report, and we made the recommendations around that, saying that the police needs to have better management of the information that it has on police bail. And I just for a moment, I wanted to broaden that argument out, because I made that point when I spoke to you, sort of in terms of the introductory comments. I think one of the biggest challenges for the justice system at the moment is that it's not gathering and collating and analysing enough information to inform key decisions around service provision and even around transformation. And we find that issue is coming up in numerous inspections. There's lots of information gathering within the criminal justice organisations, but not enough in terms of analysing that information, trying to understand what it means, and more importantly, using that information to inform the decision making. And that applies within the individual organisations, and I would say that also applies in terms of the Criminal Justice Board and the access that the Criminal Justice Board has to that information. And that applies to bail and remand, but it also applies within for example, around children within the Juvenile Justice Centre. It applies around child protection. It applies around child sexual exploitation. If you look at our reports and our recommendations, that issue about information and use of information is a recurring theme.
That's actually really helpful for the committee to take forward, I think. It's really useful. But just on the back of what you've said there, is there a role in this for the judiciary? Because oftentimes, and without compromising the independence of the judiciary, and we'll hear from them in due course, but oftentimes there are circumstances where the police oppose bail, but the judge grants bail, and that can have a consequential impact on the confidence in society of the system and actually the police, and for victims too. Do you see? Have you looked at those issues?
Well, as you know, judiciary is not under our remit, so and you know that fine. And it's obviously very welcome that they are appearing. They agreed to meet with yourselves in terms of the committee. But saying that, we do engage with the judiciary in our inspections, and we have conversations with the judiciary, and they will raise issues that are concerned to them. And while we can't obviously make recommendations to the judiciary, we do reflect their concerns in our report. And on the issue of bail, certainly the judges would have told me that sometimes their decisions on bail and whether somebody is remanded is limited, because essentially the alternatives, the suitable alternatives may not be available at the court. For example, a suitable address. So what they're saying, and sometimes those solutions are not just resting with the police or with other criminal justice organisations. It's maybe the housing executive or the health trusts. But that would be, so I suppose to answer your question, yes, we don't inspect the judiciary, we don't make recommendations to them, but we engage with them and we reflect their concerns in our reports.
Well, that's helpful, thank you very much. And this is the last one. Within the course of your inspections that you've conducted, you've indicated there one on the probation approved premises in Northern Ireland, and the thing that has struck me of late is the situation for women. I see that there are 2 places where women can go, but those are mixed places, and there is not anywhere in Northern Ireland a place that is a female-only, probation-approved premises. What is your view of the impact of that?
Right, well, I'll pass to Maureen because Maureen was our lead inspector on that approved premises inspection.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a very live issue in terms of the lack of options that there are for to support the transition for certain women from custody and into community. The approved premises where they are mixed, there are just many more challenges there, and the potential risks then to residents are evident. And it's one of the reasons the strategic recommendation that we made in relation to the approved premises was for the different organisations, the Department of Justice, the Probation Board, the Prison Service, the Housing Executive, to come together and actually have a strategic look at what the demand for places was across the system, and to look at that on a longer term basis, and look and see, is that meeting the needs of the people who are being discharged from custody, and looking to develop and use that to actually inform what service you're delivering. At the minute, we have a number of places and a number of premises, and incrementally the number of places has increased, but there hasn't been that strategic look at what are the needs and the demands for this service. And there's also a particular issue with women. There are issues. It's more challenging when you have hostels which accept probation-only referrals as opposed to hostels which accept referrals on the basis of homelessness as well. So there's particular challenges there, and there's particular challenges with older people, particularly coming out of custody and requiring accommodation in approved premises where there may be physical and other health needs that they're not able to address.
Absolutely. And since you conducted that inspection, Maureen, have you had any updates about progress on those strategic issues about a place for women?
Not yet. We haven't done a follow-up review on that inspection. So we really had the one strategic recommendation, the strategic recommendation will take a longer time to work through. But there were other important recommendations, and one particularly on practical resettlement support as well. So despite a lot of work that the Prison Service had done to ease that transition in terms of bank accounts, email addresses, photographic ID, registration with GPs, those things were still problematic for people transitioning to approved premises, and we would encourage them to continue to work at that to improve that situation for people.
No, that's great, and I read that in the report. Look, you've been very generous with your time, and your answers have been full of candour, and we're really grateful to you for that. I presume no member has anything else, and we're all satisfied. On that basis, can I thank you both very much for taking the time and for being so generous with us in that regard, and we wish you well, and no doubt we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you. All right, members, if I can move you on to agenda item 5, which is Statutory Rule 2023/15, the Insolvency Amendment Rules Northern Ireland 2023, which is at page 304 to 387 of your meeting pack. You should also refer to the Examiner's Statutory Rules First Report of Session 23/24, which is at pages 34 to 98 at the meeting pack for agenda items 5 to 16. So, this statutory rule amends the Insolvency Rules Northern Ireland 1991 to provide permanent procedural rules for the company moratorium procedure, which allows companies in financial distress some breathing space to explore rescue and restructuring options free from creditor actions. It will also ensure the procedural rules for all corporate insolvency procedures are contained in one instrument. The rules replace temporary rules included in the Corporate Insolvency and Governance Act 2020, which protected companies from being wound up during the pandemic. So, members, the Department of Economy has responsibility for insolvency policy, but the previous committee had sought the view of the Committee for the Economy, which confirmed it had no objection to the proposal for the rule. The Committee for Justice agreed on the 17th of February 2022 that it was content for the rule to be made. The Department has confirmed that there have been no changes to the policy since the proposal was considered by the Committee. and the examiner of statutory rules raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the rule. So are members content with the statutory rule?
Agreed.
Right. So now that you're content, I'm going to put the question that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2023/15, the Insolvency Amendment Rules, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, SR 2022/16, the Police Act 1997, Criminal Records Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023. And I would refer members to pages 389 to 397 of the meeting pack. So, this rule will amend the Police Act 1997 and Criminal Records Disclosure Regulations, Northern Ireland 2008, to provide eligibility for enhanced access NI checks for individuals seeking to act as an adult placement carer in accordance with the Adult Placement Agency's Regulation, Northern Ireland 2007. Eligibility will extend to those under the age of 16 residing in the household where the adult placement is taking place. The Department of Health has sought this change to bring arrangements for enhanced checks for adult placements in line with arrangements for children being placed in private households. And again, the examiner of statutory rules raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the statutory rule. Are members content with the rule? Yes. All right. So, the question is that the Committee for Justice considered Statutory Rule 2023/16, the Police Act 1997, Criminal Records Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Agenda item 7, SR 2023/17, the Rehabilitation of Offenders Exceptions Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2023. Pages 399 to 406 of your pack refer. So this rule allows some convictions to become spent, and they're set out in the Rehabilitation of Offenders Exceptions Order, Northern Ireland 1979. Certain professions and occupations which involve a high degree of trust or deal with vulnerable persons must therefore declare all past convictions, including spent convictions, when asked. The rule amends the 1979 order to allow exempted questions to be asked of applicants seeking to act as an adult placement carer in accordance with the Adult Placement Agency's Regulations, Northern Ireland 2007, and of those who reside in the same household as the adult placement carer, including those who are under 16. They will therefore be required to disclose all spent convictions. The examiner of statutory rules raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the rule. Are members content with the rule?
Content.
So the question is that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2022/17, the Rehabilitation of Offenders Exceptions Amendment Order, Northern Ireland, and has no objection to the rule. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agenda item 8, Statutory Rule 2022/63, the Judicial Pensions Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023. And this is in your packet, pages 408 to 419. This statutory rule makes a number of technical amendments to the Judicial Pensions Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015, which created the Northern Ireland Judicial Pension Scheme. The amendments recognise the service between 2000 and 2015 in the fee-paid Judicial Pension Scheme, change the rules of forfeiture and correct the definition of index adjustment, and remove the obligation to carry out actuarial valuations as the scheme is closed to further accruals from April 2022. So again, the examiner of statutory rules has raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the rule. Are members content with the rule?
Just a point of clarity, sorry. I know it's probably very technical, but is it just to maintain parity with England and Wales because they're tied? So it's a tidying up exercise, is it more, or?
Kathy?
I would need to check that. If it's the judicial pension, there are tribunal judges and would need to be tied and things like that.
So they're under the one broad scheme, I suppose. Is that what it is? And
yeah.
It's really to maintain parity across them?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Most of the
That's
pension schemes,
Yeah, it's there, page 409.6.
And similar amendments have been made to the same pension schemes that apply elsewhere, yes.
Just to clarify, thank you.
409.6. Due to the department states the provisions
This
seek
is
to maintain
parity.
parity with amendments to the 2015
I was just
judicial
making sure it's
scheme.
under the same scheme, but no, that's
Yeah.
fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So are members content with the rule?
Content, yep.
All right. So the question is that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2023-63, the Judicial Pensions Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland, and has no objection to the rule. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Agenda item 9, SR 202-64, the Police Service of Northern Ireland Amendment Regulations 2023, which is at page 421 to 426 of your pack. This rule amends the Police Service of Northern Ireland Regulations 2005 and the Police Service of Northern Ireland Reserve Injury Benefit Regulations 2008 to include May the 8th, 2023 in the definition of public holidays for 2023. This reflected the announcement of a public holiday on that date to mark the coronation of His Majesty King Charles III. So the date to which the amendment applies has passed, however the committee will still need to consider if it's content with the rule. The Examiner of Statutory Rules has raised no concerns about the technical aspects. Are members content with the rule?
Content, yep.
So the question is that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2023-63, the Police Service of Northern Ireland Amendment Regulations 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Agenda item 10, I'm so sorry about this, we're nearly there. Agenda item 10, SR 2023-107, Judicial Pensions, Remediable Service, etc. Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, at pages 428 to 479 of your pack. The Public Service Pensions and Judicial Offices Act 2022 provides remedies for the age discrimination identified in the MacLeod case, which is present in judicial pension schemes across the UK, including the Northern Ireland Judicial Pension Scheme. The rule makes a number of technical amendments to the Judicial Pensions Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, which created the NI Judicial Pension Scheme. The amendments will address liabilities to and amounts owed by the NI Judicial Pension Scheme. It will make specific provision for those who have transfers in or out of the scheme, have partially retired or made an early retirement reduction buyout. It will make provision for circumstances where a person has received an immediate detriment payment of MacLeod being affected, and extend the remedy of categories affected by the discrimination in MacLeod other than active members of the scheme. The Examiner of Statutory Rules has raised no concerns about the technical aspects of the rule. Are members content with the rule?
Content.
So the question is that the Committee for Justice considered Statutory Rule 2023/107, the Judicial Pensions, Remediable Service, etc. Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Agenda item 11, SR 2023/122, the Police Pensions Remediable Service Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, at pages 481 to 529 of your meeting pack. This rule will amend the Police Pension Regulations 2015, Northern Ireland 2015, to implement the retrospective part of the MacLeod judgment by amending scheme rules to remove the effect of the discriminatory measures applied between the 1st of April 2015 and the 31st of March 2022, which is known as the remedy period. It will provide eligible members with a choice of final salary or career average scheme benefits for the remedy period, and will outline options on how contributions owed may be collected and returned to the member. The statutory rule to implement the prospective part of the MacLeod judgment will be considered at next week's meeting. The Examiner of Statutory Rules has not indicated any concern with the technical aspects. Are members content with the rule?
Content, yeah.
The question is that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2023/122, the Police Pensions Remediable Service Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Let's see, which one are we at? We're at 12 out of 16. So, agenda item 12, SR 2023/138, the Coronavirus Act 2020, extension of provisions relating to live links for court and tribunals, number 2 order, Northern Ireland 2023, and this is at pages 531 to 569 of your meeting pack. The rule will extend the provisions in the Coronavirus Act 2020, which allows courts and statutory tribunals to receive evidence wholly or in part through the use of audio or video links until the 24th of March 2024. The explanatory memorandum providing information on the consultations that have been undertaken and on equality impact considerations can be found at pages 540 to 542 of the pack. This rule was preceded by SR 2022 number 227 and SR 223 number 46, which each extended the provisions for the maximum 6-month period allowed for any relevant provisions of the Coronavirus Act. These were laid following dissolution of the Assembly in 2022 and are included in the meeting pack today. An earlier extension of the provisions was considered by the previous committee and affirmed by the Assembly on the 1st of March 2022. At that time, the committee was advised that this was part of a two-staged approach, whereby the provisions would initially be extended by subordinate legislation prior to the development of a bill to make permanent provision for the use of audio and video links in the next mandate. The Examiner of Statutory Rules raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the rule. However, the Examiner has drawn attention to a number of confirmatory statutory rules, including the 3 mentioned, and noted that the use of successive statutory rules has the effect of ensuring that, where an individual rule ceases to have effect, its provision prevails in the statutory rules that follows it. So the proposal for a further extension of the provision has been included on the committee's forward work programme for the meeting on the 7th of March 2024. And it's proposed that we seek the Department's views on whether the continuous use of powers on the Coronavirus Act 2020 is proportionate and appropriate in a post-COVID environment, and to outline its plans to make permanent provision for use of audio and video links, including in an indicative time frame. Mm-hmm. So, are members content with the statutory rule, or do you wish to postpone your decision until we've received a response from the Department?
It'd be useful to hear the information, I think, so I'd postpone it if we could, personally.
I think that's fair enough. I mean, we've got time, and the issue's been raised with the Minister as well around permanent provision of this, and rather than piggybacking on coronavirus. So that's fair enough then. On that basis...
Lord Chair, presumably even if the Department indicates, the Minister indicates she's going to bring back legislation to make this permanent, we will still have to do this. Pass this rule in the meantime.
Yes,
okay.
But I think for now it would be helpful to hear the Minister's views on it, and see even time frames about those matters. It would be helpful. So on that basis, I'm asking members to note Statutory Rule 2023-46, the Coronavirus Act 2020, extension of provisions relating to live links for courts and tribunals order, Northern Ireland 2023. Agreed to note?
Will that come back, on the same day then, just on the 7th as well?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll just bring it, okay.
Well, I think so, won't it?
We'll ask, we can ask for it.
We can ask and check.
Okay.
We've got time around this one, haven't we?
I think next week would probably be the last week. I'm not sure what date the Minister plans to bring the motion on this. I'm looking at the coronavirus. Sorry, what date? 11th or 12th. Okay, yeah, that's
making sure
time. Yeah, that does leave plenty of time.
That's fine. So, members have agreed to note SR 2023-46, and they also need to note SR 2022-227, the Coronavirus Act 2020, extension of provisions relating to live links for courts and tribunals order, Northern Ireland 2022. Members agreed to note?
Good.
Lovely, thank you. Agenda item 13, SR 2023-162, the Violent Crime Reduction Act 2006, specification for imitation firearms regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, which is at page 571 to 584 of your pack. The rule will prescribe technical specifications that imitation firearms must conform to in order to prevent their conversion to functional firearms. The Violent Crime Reduction Act 2006 specification for imitation firearms regulations 2011, which set out the technical specifications for imitation firearms, were intended to extend across the UK, but it has been confirmed that these extend only to Great Britain. This rule will bring Northern Ireland into line with the rest of the UK. The rule will also implement obligations under the Windsor Framework and aligns with the UK's response on the regulatory framework for alarm and signal weapons. The Examiner of Statutory Rules hasn't raised any concerns about the technical aspects. Are members content with the rule?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2023/162, the Violent Crime Reduction Act 2006, Specification for Imitation Firearms Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Agenda item 14, SR 2023-175, the Magistrates Court Stalking Protection Orders Rules, Northern Ireland 2023, and this is found at page 586 of your pack. The rule will provide the court procedures in relation to the operation of stalking protection orders, which were provided for in the Protection from Stalking Act, Northern Ireland 2022. SPOs aim to intervene at an early stage to address and disrupt stalking behaviours before they become entrenched or escalate in severity. The Examiner of Statutory Rules has raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the rule. Are members content?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2023/175, the Magistrates Court Stalking Protection Orders Rules, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
So members, you should be aware that the commencement order for the relevant provisions in the Stalking Act is provided at pages 603 to 605 for information. The commencement order is not subject to any Assembly procedure. So if members are content then to note SR 2023/174 C10, the Protection from Stalking 2022 Act Commencement Order, Northern Ireland 2023. Content to note?
Good.
Thank you. Agenda item 15, SR 2023/220, the Insolvency Amendment Number 2 Rules, Northern Ireland 2023, which is at page 607 of your pack. The rule will increase the maximum potential realisable value for a single domestic motor vehicle that can be excluded from the asset criteria when determining the value of a person's property for the purposes of debt relief order, and it will increase from £1,000 to £2,000. The Department states that the limits for those items to be excluded for this purpose were last set out in 2016. As well as a single motor vehicle, the limits apply to essential household items, tools or equipment essential for work, surplus monthly income after tax, national insurance and normal household expenses and debts. However, in the absence of the Assembly, the only limit that could be changed is that for a motor vehicle, which is subject to the negative resolution procedure. The other limits are subject to a different form of Assembly control. So I'm seeking your agreement to ask the Department to outline its plans to amend the limits for other items that must be excluded from the asset criteria when determining the value of a person's property for the purposes of the debt relief order. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Yes, that's lovely. And are members content with the statutory rule?
Agreed.
Content, yeah.
Thank you. So the question is that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2023/220, the Insolvency Amendment Number 2 Rules, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agenda item 16, SR 2024/17, the Police Act 1997, Criminal Records, Fees Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024, page 615 of your pack. The rule will amend the Police Act 1997, Criminal Records Disclosure Regulations, Northern Ireland 2008, to reduce the fees payable for basic and standard checks by Access NI from £18 to £16, and for enhanced checks from £33 to £32. This follows a review of the business model, which considered projected costs and incomes based on a higher level of demand. As there has been a significant and sustained uplift in the demand for checks, resulting in a surplus for Access NI. In line with managing public funds, Northern Ireland, it should not attract a surplus or a loss. Are members content with the statutory rule?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Just on aside from that, could we ask the Department, just as a matter of interest, why Access NI checks are conducted on the basis of a person for each organisation as opposed to just on the person, so that the one check would cover every organisation you're involved with?
Generally now, obviously, I was in my previous role
Yes.
where I was a subgroup for Access NI for organisations and businesses, and actually carried that process out. It's only relevant the day it's done, so you can't carry it forward. So when you get an Access I check, it's up to that date. A week later, you move on to a new job. Something could have happened within that week, So that's generally, but if you need the detail in written form, but that's why you can't carry and access an eye check. It's not done on something that you have for a year, because the next day something could happen. You can't carry it, so you must have it within every organisation that you go to work with if you're working with children and vulnerable adults, particularly the enhanced check.
Fair enough. Okay, that helps me to understand. But I just kind of thought, actually, you know, people having to apply.
It is,
if you're
yeah.
an officer in the BB,
Aye.
and then if you're in a Sunday school, or you know, you're having to constantly.
It's only as relevant as
That's
the
fair enough.
date
That
you
clears
get
up.
it
And
done.
thanks very much for that. Then I will retract. So, on the basis of everything that's gone before, with the exception of what I said, are members content with the rule?
agreed.
All right. So the question is that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2023/220, the Insolvency Amendment Number 2 Rules, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Agenda item 16. SR 2024/17, the Police Act 1997, Criminal Records Fees Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024. And this is at page 615 of your pack. The rule will amend the Police Act 1997. Sorry?
No, we've done that. It's for the fees. Finished.
We just did.
It's a Brexit one now.
Was this in twice?
Yeah.
Right, I just did not turn the page. Okay, that's
What
fine.
number 7?
Apologies. Right, and that's it. Sorry, that's my fault.
CSRs
It's
are
been
finished.
a really long day because I had Windsor Framework this morning, so apologies, folks. Please bear with me. Right, agenda item 17. Marvellous, we have moved off statutory rules. Right, agenda item 17, Brexit in Northern Ireland, written briefing from the EU Affairs Manager, pages 626 to 660 of your meeting pack refers. The written briefing includes a general Brexit paper that covers the protocol as amended by the Windsor Framework and the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement, as well as ongoing issues such as divergence. There's also a paper that summarises Brexit issues, which are contained within the remit of this committee. The paper suggests that the committee may wish to ask the Department for the following: information on officials' attendance at meetings of the Specialised Committee on Law Enforcement and Judicial Cooperation and its work, information and updates on the impact of the new policing, security and criminal justice arrangements for Northern Ireland as outlined in the paper, the Department's views on the provisions of the Nationality and Borders Act 2022 as outlined in the paper, and the notice of and summaries of meetings of the Interministerial Group on Justice. Are members content for the committee to request this information from the Department?
Agreed.
Thank you. And that takes us to correspondence, which is item 18. So there's a correspondence memo in your packs at page 662, and there are 6 items of correspondence. I'm going to draw your attention to several of them, and then you'll have an opportunity to comment on any of the other items of correspondence in which you have a particular interest. I would draw your attention to item 1, which is at page 664. It's from the Clerk to the Executive Office Committee and includes a first day brief from the Executive Office that notes references to ending violence against women and girls. I would ask your agreement to note this item and request a written update from the Department on its work in this subject area. Yes? Thank you. I'm going to draw your attention to item 4, which is at page 735, which is from Professor Gráinne McKeever of the Ulster University Law Clinic. This correspondence relates to a research report and recommendations regarding the participation of litigants in person in civil and family courts in Northern Ireland. I would ask your agreement to note this item and ask the Department for its views on the research and recommendations. Thank you. And then if we move to item 5, which is at page 739, this is a request from an individual, and it contains a request to meet with me as the committee chairperson to discuss the collection of memorabilia. The clerk has suggested that maybe we should note this item and provide the individual with a copy of the agreed minutes of the first committee meeting. Members content to do that?
I think one of the other committees, I think he's came to all the committees. We just signed the agenda, and everyone signed it, and sent him a copy of the agenda.
Yes, well, we could do that. Members content? That's what we'll do then. We'll make sure he's got something for his
Signed
collection.
photo.
Pardon?
Signed photo.
I'm sure that's the last thing he wants, actually. Right.
God love him if he gets that.
Dave Rogue Scholar. Right. Item 6. is at page 751 to 766 of your pack, and it's from Barry MacDonald, QC. Mr MacDonald has provided information on legal proceedings in respect of residential properties at Victoria Square in Belfast, and he's provided a draft proposal for legislation that would extend the limitation period for actions under the Defective Premises Northern Ireland Order 1975. There are references in the correspondence to the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs and the Department of Finance. Members, before we go on with proposals around this, I want to notify you that in my capacity as Justice spokesperson for the DUP, previously I have met with Mr MacDonald and Ulster Garden Villages on this issue. But that was in my capacity as a private MLA, not as anything to do with this committee. So, down here, I'm asking your agreement to write to the Department of Justice to ascertain which department has responsibility for this area and to find out how the matter is being addressed. Are members content with that? Deirdre?
Yeah, no, obviously this is a serious issue and that people have had to literally leave their homes.
Yes.
And it's probably a really complex one as well in terms of where responsibility lies. I know it came up in finance yesterday, just around rates and stuff like that for the residents that are there. And obviously just when you look at Grenfell and other incidents around building control, and that was discussed yesterday, I think it is important. I think it's also, it would be useful then to write, but also to ask the Minister, I mean, firstly, does part of this in terms of extending the limitation period fall under the department, and if so, to get an indication if the Minister is going to look at that by way of that period, so to try and get as much of the information in terms of how it relates to the Justice Department.
There's a couple of things down here that kind of are in my brief, but there were things that had occurred to me because these people have been batted from post to post.
Yeah, 100%.
Between departments each time. They have written to Jane Brady in July. They have yet to receive a response, and the clock is running out. So along with the proposals that we have in front of us, which are that we write to the Department of Justice to ascertain whether they have responsibility and to find out how the matter is being addressed. You've proposed to write to the Minister, which I suspect is probably the same thing,
Oh, well, yeah,
Deirdre.
100%.
But also to write to the Committee for Agriculture, Environment, Rural Affairs and the Committee for Finance, to inform them of correspondence. But I also think in a tandem process with this, if members were agreed, that we could write to the Executive Office and establish from them which is the lead department. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise we're going to waste further time. Yeah. Now the department, and we can express in that letter that we have sought amongst the departments clarity, but we would like them, in circumstances where there can't be agreement, to adjudicate that somebody should take the lead on this, and as a matter of urgency. Because
I agree, and CC Jane Brady in again. I mean, if she's been involved in terms of from a civil service point of view, I think definitely that coordination is what's needed.
Yeah, and
so
I appreciate it's a parallel process, but I'm conscious of time frames and the seriousness of the issue.
100%.
Yes?
Yep.
Yes.
Lovely, thank you very much. All right. Are members content to note the other items of correspondence, or do you have any comments you wish to make, anything you wish to raise on them?
Just one comment, obviously, are very much welcome. Obviously, the litigates and persons in civil and family courts, and particularly in relation to family courts, and I welcome obviously some of the recommendations in relation to the barriers to being able to qualify for legal aid, just the practical and emotional and attitudinal stuff as well. So it's just to say I think it's long overdue and very, very welcome, and it would be useful to have regular updates as to where that kind of will lead to. But I think it's something that's really, really critical and moving forward for our families.
Members agreed?
Great.
Yeah.
Seeking updates, yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right, item 19, which is Chairperson's business. So the Deputy Chairperson and I held an introductory meeting with the Minister for Justice on Monday, I think it was. I mean, Clark, do you want to give anything of note from that meeting that you felt the committee should know?
Thanks, Chair, and Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson discussed matters of budget, legislative plans, and collaboration with the committee, essentially. So we'll hear from the Minister at the end. I think it's into April or May, but we'll hear from the Minister then at committee. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, it was a very constructive meeting, and hopefully that will continue as we progress. There'll always be issues on which we disagree, but I think we're all here for the right reasons and the right purposes. Also, just to let you know that the Deputy Chairperson and I have received an invitation to meet with the Chairperson of the Independent Monitoring Board for McGallery Prison, and we'll report back again on anything that we feel needs to be brought to the committee's attention. Are you content with that? Yeah. Thank you. So, any other business? Agenda item 20. Does anybody have any other business they wish to raise? No? Okay, then that takes us to the date and time and place of the next meeting. So the next meeting will be next Thursday, which is the 29th of February at 2 p.m, back to normal time, 2 p.m. in this room. All right, members, thank you very much. That's it. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Committee Room 30. Sound. 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 Committee Room 30. Sound.